Hello, this is a video on how I make my panel compositions, how I layer and show characters and all that stuff. And so I want to talk about all of the psychology that goes into it, starting with the medium and choice of how I show my audience things. So Bribob is a primarily web-based, it's a webcomic, and most people are only going to see it in a scroll view on like social media or like Comic Fury. And the way they see it is that every single panel is its own individual page, and they'll scroll and see like one, and then they'll see like another one underneath it, so on and so forth. So it's a kind of unique way to make comics instead of having like a full page where you have a bunch of individual things. I decided to go the route of having every single mini panel be its own page. So that's very important for my kind of process. Another thing is I try to anticipate and keep in mind that I need to keep hooking in new viewers so I could get more people into my comic. So first off, I have to have a good hook at the beginning of every chapter. And if I split up my chapters into multiple sections for social media like Instagram or TikTok, I try to think about a panel in the middle somewhere that also would have a good enough hook to lure in new viewers and get them invested in my comic. So I'm always trying to think of good hooks. Okay, so now we've got the social media stuff out of the way and the way that I format for the internet. I'm going to be talking about a more in-depth process that's going to be a little tricky to follow if you haven't read Bribob, because I'm going to be talking about the psychology of the characters and how that plays into the panel compositions here. Okay, so this is chapter 243. Stevito has just reformed, and they have just freed the Diamond Empire from Yellow, White, and Blue Diamond's control. So Stevito starts to just ramble off like, what are you guys going to make now that you're not under, a dictatorship? All this stuff. And I wanted to emphasize how enthusiastic and like wild Stevito is, and how I gave him spiral eyes and this like Cheshire cat smile and a close-up of the face. Anytime I do close-up of the faces with characters, especially doing maniacal smiles, it's to try to make it seem creepier and more intense. So to give an example, so for this panel versus like this one, now if I was to do this kind of dialogue on this type of composition where Stevito's, small in the distance, it would feel less intense. The reader, or at least I feel more crowded, and that Stevito's like staring at me and it's a little uncomfortable versus this kind of framing. I hope that makes sense. So, yeah, Stevito has let them go, but then all the gems kind of decide they're not used to freedom yet, so they just immediately elect Stevito to be their leader again. And Stevito just is like, okay, and scratches their head. It's like, okay, sure, why not? And then we have an establishing shot kind of here where we see the beach that they're on, and this is the Diamond Rampa Tower and also the Banana Fort. And they're walking on land, so you can see the scale of stuff. And then Stevito's like talking to himself, and then out of nowhere, Pearl appears and says, "I'm so proud of you." And Stevito's just kind of like, whoa. It's like, so Pearl in my comic, has been pretty evil and pretty creepy. And I wanted it to take the readers by surprise that Pearl was sneaking up behind Stevito. So there wasn't any foreshadowing for that. She just appears. And it was supposed to be a little unnerving. And then Stevito immediately twirls her around, which is implying possible fusion with Steven Universe stuff. Dancing leads to fusion. And so yeah, so some of these shots are just having some variety. Like, I like doing close-ups, but it's important to show the scale of or not the scale, I don't know. It's important to have a little bit of variety, because if every shot is just a close-up or something, or just a faraway shot, it gets pretty boring. So some of it's just like, okay, I've done enough of these. Why not try a different angle or different perspective here? And And then Pearl asks, what kind of world do you long for, Stevito? Because now Stevito has all this power. Stevito's got the diamond, like all the diamonds on their engagement rings and all that. And so Stevito's like, you go first. So then I have a song choreographed to this part of the chapter. It's the title of the song is "The Darker Days of Me and Him," and it's a really nice song. So then I'm thinking of choreographing music to comic panels. And so I start off with a shot of them, walking on the beach, showing their, body language and all that stuff. And then a closer up shot of them, like, holding hands. And then this one, Pearl singing about, I long for a land where no man was ever known. It's supposed to be a callback to, like, the resentment and festering feelings that Pearl has about being stranded on Earth and all that stuff. But then the interesting composition, I think, comes in next. So I wanted these to be, lull you into a sense of just, not security, but it's not too crazy. And then the interesting part of the song starts where, so the lyrics are, I long for a land where no man was ever known. And then it's a land with no neurosis. So then, I wanted a close-up shot of Pearl to have that claustrophobic feeling again, to really see every intense little weird detail on her face as she's staring at Stevito while saying, like, I wish there was no neurosis. It's pretty intense. And then I wanted the background here to also be, like, texture lines that emphasize Pearl's psychology. So then Stevito starts singing along. So, I wish for a land with no neurosis and no psychosis. And so then Stevito's like, it's supposed to show, like, Stevito gets it. Stevito's vibing with what Pearl's putting down. And, another close-up shot. And it's supposed to be implied that Stevito's looking right down into Pearl's eyes, and Pearl's looking up into Stevito. And then that's made more clear in the next panel where the song continues, no neurosis, no psychosis, no psychoanalysis. No psychoanalysis. And so then they're both staring into each other. And then the final shot that breaks the tension is, and no sadness. And you can see that they're in a funny pose. It's like, they're still dancing, and they're still vibing, and then they fuse. And you can see the fusion is already pretty warped. There's too many arms coming out of it for it to be like a normal fusion. And, like, it's kind of implied in Steven Universe lore that the more crazy the fusion looks, like, the more unstable it is. I don't know if that's true. I think that might just be a fan theory. So we have this shot, and it's supposed to be like a fun anticipatory shot of, like, oh, what's this fusion going to look like? Oh my gosh, it's got too many arms. It's kind of interesting. And then we get another, this is a shot. I wanted to first establish the scale of the fusion. So you can see these, like, spindly, like, root-like appendages coming down. And this is Rose's sword here. So it gives an immediate sense of scale for how large the fusion is. And you can also see the diamond ring on one of the little appendages here. And then I wanted to show a shot of the face of the new fusion. So there's a bunch of eyes. There's, like, an anglerfish thing where Pearl's gem is, like, stuck on the end of it. And then I wanted, like, a skeletal rib cage to be on top of the tongue here. And the fusion's hissing. And it's just very cool. And then we have another establishing shot of, like, the scale of the fusion, and a bigger body shot of, like, what the fusion looks like. And I feel like it's a fun progression. So I think a lot about the order. And so one of the fun things about this kind of format of making comics is that sometimes if something doesn't feel right, I can do this. And I can switch the order and see, like, does that feel more interesting? Does that flow better? And sometimes I can work around just, like, moving panels around and seeing sometimes if that flows better story-wise. So then we have another establishing shot of Naverlin. I had to find a way to configure Nagito, Steven, and Pearl's name into one fusion. So I was like, okay, Neverland works. And so it's like, I kind of wanted it to be shrimp-like, centipede-like, and has like the anglerfish thing going on. And then immediately, Stevito was just married. So they're like, sorry, Pearl, we're kicking you out. We're on our honeymoon. And then Neverland rips its own angler antenna thing off and breaks itself out of the fusion. And then this final shot is like a bird's eye view where we see that Garnet and Amethyst have been watching this whole thing go down on top of the Diamond Rampa tower here, because they've been hiding out there since the Desvito arc. And so this also sets up the next chapter, and it gives the audience something to anticipate and be excited about, that Garnet's plan is still somehow formulating here. And it adds some tension because it shows that Stevito isn't safe, because there's still something brewing in the background. Okay, that's my thought process behind how I made the composition for this chapter. I really hope that made sense. I feel like this is a little bit complicated. Like, I don't know. If something didn't make sense, let me know. I'll try to make another video on it. But that's what I was thinking when I was making this chapter in particular. Again, if you haven't read Bribob, I feel like that's going to make, like, next to no sense at all, like, most of the explanations here. But thank you so much for watching. And I do a Tutorial Tuesday poll vote on my Patreon for people that want to see stuff from me. So check that out if you're interested. Okay, bye.